Good afternoon and welcome to our Talent Summit virtual presented by RVA Now and Chamber RVA. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. This is the second part of our in-person Talent Summit we held in December. And I'm Brian Anderson, President of the Chamber, and so thankful again that you are with us today. And you're going to enjoy our conversation, not just because of the presentation itself, but there's probably no bigger issue to the business community right now than the discussion of talent. All businesses that I talk to on a regular basis have openings they cannot fill. And that's a combination of some people still have not re-entered the workforce due to family, child care and elder care issues. Also, again, continued concerns about the pandemic. And then third, we just lost a number of people who have chosen to go into different lines of work. And so all those issues related to our talent and workforce field have created this conversation. We've got to do things differently, and we appreciate you being here for this conversation today. I mentioned that we had our December Talent Summit held at Virginia Union University in person. And although there were many topics we discussed that day that were very instrumental and informative, we thought the middle part of the presentation was worth resharing, and that's the conversation around labor market analysis that we've done and we want to present to you today. So I want to thank our sponsors who always make things happen. And our in-person Talent Summit back in December, the presenting sponsor was Dominion Energy, our gold sponsor was Altria, silver sponsors Facebook, Meta, and Virginia 529, then our bronze sponsor, Virginia Credit Union. And then today, we're fortunate again to have this labor analysis report being made available for us to review today and hear about and discuss. But also, thanks to Bank of America, we're going to be able to provide that labor analysis report to the business community as they need that information. And we'll be able to do some other things around information for our member businesses as we go forward. So let me welcome our longtime president of Bank of America here in Richmond, Victor Branch. For those that don't know Victor, he is a wonderful person. And let me just say that again, as a friend, as a person who gets to work with him in a number of endeavors. Let me just tell you a little bit about Victor. Victor, in addition to being the husband of Michelle and having the proud father of two daughters, Victor graduated from Richard Bland College and William and Mary College. I won't say how long ago because we're similar in age and we like to keep that quiet. But proud graduate of those institutions, which led him to the banking world going back to 1984. And he spent 35 years, actually 37 years now at Bank of America, most recently in 2015 being named president of the Richmond Region. Outside of the remarkable work Victor does with this corporation and working with his team and his associates, he's also been on probably every board in this market. And again, not just as a placeholder, not just with his name on the roster, but Victor rolls up his hands and gets the work done. Boards like our board, Chamber RVA, the Virginia Foundation for Independent Colleges, Venture Richmond, YMCA of Greater Richmond, the Go Virginia Region 4 Job Alliance Committee, and I could go on and on. He's also received many, many awards and recognition for his service across the years. And again, I just want to say as one business leader to another, I thank him for his his passion. I thank him for his heart, and just know that he's the kind of individual that all of us would like to call friend. And this, again, on another personal note, he's one of the few people I know that I've never seen him not smiling. So Victor, anytime I see you, I'm just thankful to see your smiling face and know that you're going to make me feel better in the interaction I have with you. And we welcome you here today. And we thank you for being a sponsor of not only today's conversation, but this labor report that'll be instrumental for our businesses going forward. Welcome, Victor.
Well, Brian, wow, thank you for that very warm introduction, man. That would have made my mother proud, and then probably my family go, well, who is that guy he's talking about? I'm privileged and honored to serve as the Bank of America president for the Richmond region, and to get to represent my nearly 2,000 teammates in the community, and to demonstrate that Bank of America is a good corporate citizen with a strong ESG platform. And we could not think of a better partner to support and to do the work that needs to be done than with Chamber RVA, with you, Brian, and your really super strong team there, and who are so focused on the needs of this community and ensuring all boats get lifted in the rising tide. This chamber is unique in that way, and it's at the center of what needs to be done in the work that needs to be done to make this a great community for everyone to enjoy. And we couldn't think of a more illustrious and better partner to support and to do this work with. And this topic around the talent is so timely and so critical. We all hear and live the phrase war on talent, and Bank of America is not unique to any other company out there who is struggling to attract top talent and to ensure we can grow our workforce, not just in this region and in the Commonwealth, but across the US. So we are very, very pleased to be a partner with the Chamber to talk about talent and the opportunity to be part of a solution. And one quick story I'll share with you, so I won't belabor and take too much time. And I told Beth that I would take 30 minutes, but I think I'll cut it short so we can really get to the meat of this program. But one thing that we are really proud of is the 2 grants we did in 2021 that is starting to bear some fruit. And one is to Virginia, to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, on a pathways to jobs to attract and build a workforce in the future that will have STEM skills and data science skills. And so it was $1 million to VCU to go into Richmond Public Schools and the middle and high schools to get students on track to graduate with credentials to come into VCU School of Engineering and to study those engineering and other STEM areas, so that when they graduate, they will be highly marketable, and Bank of America will have jobs waiting for them in our AI and other data science fields right here in Richmond, Virginia. And then towards the end of 2021, we established a partnership with Virginia Union University, where we gave them $1 million to develop and design a program for jobs in the financial services industry, particularly the high net worth sector. And we're building out that initiative and program with Virginia Union as we speak. So we're trying to be a part of the solution to help. We know this is a long play to build that pipeline for youth that are in school now to become marketable for some of these jobs, particularly jobs of the future, that will be waiting for these future graduates. But we're also working with our local community colleges, Reynolds and Brightpoint, and other organizations in the field who are helping make job skilling, upskilling a critical point. So we're excited to again partner with the chamber and applaud you for continuing to focus on this critically important area, because we all are going to benefit from it, and continue to make Richmond the best place in the U.S. to reside in. So Brian, I turn it back to you, my friend.
Thank you, Victor. We just appreciate you being here and the work of your team and the investments you're making. You're right. It takes all of us to do what we need to do. And y'all have made some very meaningful strategic investments that we know will pay off not only to the individuals that are affected, but also to the collective good of our region. So thank you for that. I also want to make sure before we shift over to the rest of the program that I thank Beth Weisbrod, Allison Pollock, and Andrew Knight. They make up our RVA Now team, who are working on a number of initiatives to make sure that we can retain the talent that we need, while we're also trying to attract talent from other places. So Beth, thank you for putting together the December summit that was so instrumental, but also putting together today. And we turn it over to you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Brian. And thank you again, Victor. We're so grateful for your support of our work. A couple housekeeping notes before we get started. As you know, these presentations have been pre-recorded from the Talent Summit in December. Feel free, however, to submit questions through the Q&A feature or in the chat. We have one of the presenters with us today, Collin, to answer any questions about his presentation. All others we will do our best to answer, but if for some reason we can't, we will do so through a later follow-up. As an FYI, each presentation is 20 minutes long. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce our three speakers. The first one is Collin Perciballi. Collin is a consultant with EMSI Burning Glass, who were our partners on the labor market report. We worked with him for almost a year on this project, benefiting tremendously from his capable guidance and expert insights. This report has become our roadmap, highlighting gaps and breaking data down to a level that helps the RVA Now team and ultimately our employer and higher ed stakeholders address them directly. Next, we have Collin with Elevation Advertising, who is our creative partner in 2020, as we were just launching this initiative and needed a powerful brand. His presentation will go over the research into GenZ and how our RVA Now brand assets and our voice developed around it. And then finally, we have Rachel Burgess with SIR as our third presenter. Rachel was one of the original RVA Now founders, along with the Chamber's own Kelly McCall. She and Kelly wrote the grant application to Go Virginia after seeing a need in the region for an initiative focusing on regional talent retention. Rachel's research into young professionals' perception of Richmond drives much of how the Chamber focuses its messaging to that demographic and addresses the needs she and her team uncover during their research. So we're gonna press play over here and get going on these presentations.
Everyone, thank you for being such gracious hosts. This is my first time to the Richmond region, so it's very exciting. I got some good food last night based on Beth's recommendations. So we were retained by the Chamber RVA and the RVA Now initiative to conduct a labor market analysis, and I'm seeing that the formatting didn't convert very well, but really we did a focus on talent retention and attraction for the RVA initiative. But before I go into some of the main findings of the report, I wanted to set a context for what's going on in the labor market. I think we all know that it's been pretty bonkers recently when we look at the labor market statistics. Employers are having a really hard time finding the talent that they need. And this is in large part due to the pandemic, but a large number of these trends are occurring because of demographics that was written long before the pandemic started. So the pandemic's just exacerbating what we're going through right now. The main trend is that demographic growth for the country doesn't look very strong. So when we talk about demographic growth, the fertility rate has to be above 2.1. So it takes 2 to tango, and you have to have 2 kids to replace yourself. And the 0.1 is really because of mortality that might occur, so accidents, sickness, that sort of thing. The problem is that the United States fertility rate is below 2.1. And we've typically been able to supplement that with immigration, but the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, immigration has been completely cut off in terms, apart from the southern border. Another big trend is the retirement of baby boomers. So before the pandemic, there were an average of 2 million baby boomer retirements a year, but in 2020, that number jumped to 3 million. So that's a 50% increase in a single year. And you know, that's really just accelerating the problems that we're seeing in the labor market right now. The problem is that the generations succeeding the baby boomer generation are smaller, and the baby boomers' jobs still exist. So you've got, you know, a replacement rate that we can't reach, and then the economy is still growing on top of that, so you're adding more jobs. So this is why we see more jobs than there are people, and that's why we're feeling a lot of the effects in the labor market. So what does this mean for the Richmond region? It basically means that the talent retention and attraction game is going to become fiercer than ever before. And we see demographic growth doesn't occur evenly across the country. So there are going to be pockets that win out on talent. They're going to grow just because they're really good at attracting and keeping their talent. But there are going to be more locations that experience stagnant or negative growth. And so that's really important because this is what the RVA Now initiative is here to address. Okay, so as I said, demographic growth doesn't occur evenly across geography or across age groups. So if we look at the Richmond region, there are pockets that are growing pretty well. I think Goochland County in our talent attraction scorecard did really well in terms of attracting talent. And also across age groups, most age groups have grown. So this table indicates the growth of ages. Well, it's cutting off the baby boomer section, but between 2015 and 2020, most age groups grew except for 2 key generations, and that was Generation X and Generation Z. Generation X is historically small compared to millennials and baby boomers, and Generation Z are the ones that are entering the workforce right now. So they're graduating from high school and college, and it's really critical age group because this is what the employers are seeking. They're looking for that entry-level talent, and it's critical to the success of your regional economy. Unfortunately, it's one of the age groups that declined in population, even though the region grew overall. So when we looked at the talent in the region, we scraped a lot of the social profiles online, and then we basically aggregated those. And we looked at graduates between 2015 and 2020 from Richmond Region institutions. From those social profiles, we looked at, okay, of those, who left the region and where did they go over the last 5 years. And this graph shows really the top 10 locations of those destinations of people that had left the region. So Washington, D.C. received a huge amount of talent, followed by New York City and Virginia Beach. Also, we could see which institutions these people graduated from. So we found that VCU and the University of Richmond accounted for the largest sections of people that had left the region. That's mostly because these are, you know, among the larger institutions in the region, and we found that a lot of the community colleges actually have a really good retention rate for the region. So this graph here, if you look at it, it's showing that retention rate by graduation year. So it's not longitudinal in that we're not saying that the retention rate has increased over the years. It's just showing 2020 graduates who remains in the region, 2019 graduates who still remains in the region, and so on and so forth. So as you go further back in time, you can see that retention rate declines a little bit, but that makes sense because you have people that are in the labor market for a longer period of time. They can entertain more economic job opportunities, and they might, move elsewhere. We also found that retention rates tend to increase with a higher degree of education attainment. So if you look at bachelor degree rates, the retention rates are lower than master's degree levels, and then PhD has the highest retention rate for the region. With the exception of associate's degrees, I mentioned that the community colleges do a really excellent job of retaining talent in the region. I think their retention rate for graduates between 2015 and 2020 was over 80%, which is really high. And that's because these community colleges are really well connected to the regional economy. Some other things to note is VCU, which is the largest institution in the region. Their retention rate is just below 55%, and the U of R, their retention rate is just below 33%. But of course, this varies by program. So if I look at programs at the University of Richmond, the retention rate is lower for business administration graduates, but if we look at the law program, that retention rate is extremely high, and that's probably related to just the sheer number of lawyers in government roles in the Richmond region. Okay, so speaking more on program retention rates, we basically combined all of the institutions and looked at, across the board, which programs of study had higher retention rates, and we noticed that engineering actually has a really good retention rate for the region. So if we looked at mechanical or electrical engineers, that retention rate is pretty high for the region. And another program that was worth noting is nursing. And this is because nursing is one of the leading programs at the community college level. So those things kind of connect with each other, and it's the reason why nursing is a really high retention rate for the region. It's really well connected to the health network of the region. Okay, so another analysis we did was to look at talent gaps and surpluses for the region. And we do this by basically creating a crosswalk between occupations and educational programs, and we map which occupations are relevant to a program of study. So it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison because, for instance, you can study accounting, which means you can become an accountant, but you can become many other things. You could become a business analyst, for example. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. But when we look at talent gaps, essentially, for these graphs, the green indicates the average number of job openings for that occupation, and the gray indicates the average number of completions. And by completions, that means the program of study that's relevant to that occupation. This is pretty important data for the RVA Now initiative because it can help with talent attraction efforts. So you can basically see your regional pipeline. What areas does the economy have difficulty finding talent for within the region? And that basically means it has to come from somewhere else if you're not producing enough talent for those jobs that are being created in the region. So from there, you can actually look at other locations that might have a surplus. And then of those locations, do we have a good network of existing Richmond Region alumni? So that is one of the strategies that RVA Now is going to focus on for talent attraction. The inverse of that is, of course, talent surplus. So basically, if your programs are producing more graduates than there are jobs available for those people. So for instance, if you have, a certain number of people studying psychology and there are far less psychology jobs, this has a big implication when it comes to talent retention, because essentially it means the person either has to find employment elsewhere outside the region, or they have to find a job that's not related to their degree. So whenever you see a talent surplus, it does have a large implication on talent retention. The flip side of that, of course, is that it can be used as a really good tool for business attraction. So As I said, the competition for talent is going to become very fierce, and based on recent trends, a lot of businesses are actually following people because people have way more leverage than they have ever had before. So business attraction is one of the plays that RVA Now can go after. Essentially, a company will look at a region and say, oh, this region has a surplus of talent. I won't have to compete as fiercely for these people, for these bodies to fill these jobs that I am having a hard time finding people for. So it's a really interesting play in terms of business attraction opportunity when you look at talent surpluses. Okay, so for some key takeaways, the first is really focus on that Generation Z piece. I think everyone talks about millennials, and they're really fun to make fun of, unfortunately. But Generation Z is really important because they are the ones entering the workforce today. And it's also the generation that it seems like the region is having a difficult time filling. The second thing to focus on is really, I'm sorry, I think I skipped ahead. Here we go. Pay attention to those talent gaps. So there are key occupations which show, large talent gaps in high demand, and those can be jobs like software developers, financial services sales agents, and logisticians. So if you can focus on that in your talent attraction strategy, you can be more effective in terms of serving the regional economy. Again, engineering a comeback. We noticed that engineering is a really good vehicle for talent retention. 2 of the top 10 programs for talent retention were engineering programs. And then when we looked at biotechnology type of occupations, it was pretty interesting because if we look at the intensity of employment for biotech jobs in the Richmond region, it's actually 3 times the national average. When you look at basic organic chemical manufacturing, that industry sector code, for an area of your size, you have 3 times the national average. And biology degrees since 2009 have more than doubled in terms of completion. So I think your education network is doing a good job in terms of serving the area's needs for that. But on the flip side, we're noticing a very low retention rate for biology degree graduates because of that large number of people graduating in biology. And we also notice the same for biochemists. So I think that's one industry sector and occupational area that will need a little more focus. Okay, so connecting alumni with further education opportunities is really important. We looked at the profiles of people that had degrees from the Richmond region, and then from there we looked at the profiles that indicated further education. And so from there we looked at, okay, about the people that got a bachelor's degree and then they wanted to go on to get a master's degree, where did they go for that higher education? About 20% of the profiles stayed in region to pursue that higher education, and another 80% left the region for getting those master's and PhD degrees. So this is a big opportunity because we mentioned the higher level of educational attainment means a higher retention rate. So if you can convince or somehow connect the talent to those programs that they're looking for within the region, then you can basically retain more of that talent. There's also a big opportunity with the University of Richmond. Among the institutions, it has among the lower retention rates, but this isn't their fault by any means. It's because that they have a large number of out-of-state students, and that's really hard to retain talent because out-of-state students have family and friend networks that are out of the state, so they're more likely to basically go back or entertain job opportunities outside the region. But as I said, program retention rates differ. So if we look at law, it's really high, but business administration is low for the university. At the same time, business administration type of occupations are projected to grow for the region. So there is economic opportunity for those graduates. So there's an opportunity there to improve retention rate for that institution. Capitalizing on this moment is really important. This goes back to that first slide when I talked about a lot of those demographic trends. Basically, we're seeing something called the Great Resignation. It's people quitting in higher numbers than ever before. And this basically means people aren't tethered to their jobs as much, which also means they aren't tethered to their location. So this is a double-edged sword. It means that you're going to have to fight to keep the talent that you have, but it also means, among other locations, it might be easier to attract talent. So for instance, a lot of the migration is occurring from places like California or New York, which are extremely expensive. They had high density and high cases of COVID, but also really draconian lockdowns, which aren't very fun when you can't enjoy the amenities of big cities. So there are a lot of opportunities for attracting talent from some of these locations. And as I mentioned, there are going to be winners and losers in talent attraction. And it seems like the demographic growth of the Richmond region has benefited from the pandemic. If we looked at some of the year-over-year population growth, it was growing but decelerating over time. So I think it was around between 0.9 and 0.8% year-over-year growth. And in 2020, it actually spiked. And actually, I was talking to my Uber driver on the way over, and he was mentioning how a lot of his drivers actually have moved back to the Richmond region during the pandemic, which was pretty interesting. And then finally, you have all this data, but it's really useless unless you operationalize it. And data needs to be field tested and validated. It has to pass the sniff test, if you will. So RVA Now's mission is to operationalize this data and basically put it into action by speaking to those employers, those institutions, and then individual talent to figure out what's going on in the market and how to keep and attract talent. Again, if you're interested in the report, the slides in front of you are basically just a high-level overview. The report itself is over 100 pages, but I was told it's going to be made available to you for download, so I encourage you to read the full report for some light holiday reading. And then, I don't know why you're laughing, it's really good. And then also two other reports to learn about more of those national trends, the talent attraction scorecard and the demographic drought. Those will cover a lot of those big demographic trends, the retirements, the baby boomers, all that interesting stuff. So you can download those from our website as well, and those are completely free. So thank you very much, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Good morning, everybody. How's my audio? Okay? Good. Well, while we're getting to, there we go, thank you so much. While we're getting to the right slides, we are a couple of weeks away from a new Matrix movie, because what year is it? And those of you that will remember the first Matrix movie might remember a scene where the protagonists go to the home of this spiritual oracle, and there they encounter this little boy, and he's surrounded by all these spoons. And he's picking up each one of these spoons one at a time, and he's concentrating on them until he bends the spoon. And he puts it down, he picks up another one, and he bends the spoon again. And the protagonists come up to him and say, "How are you doing that?" And the little boy says, "If you want to bend the spoon, you have to acknowledge the truth, that there is no spoon." And I think about this a lot when we talk about generational psychographics, particularly when it comes to Gen Z. Because I think for us to have a productive conversation about getting inside the minds of Gen Z, we have to acknowledge that there is no one mind to get into for Gen Z. Perhaps more so than any other demographic that we study, there's so much pride in the uniqueness that this generation has to offer, their unwillingness to be put into a specific box or stamped with a specific label. In fact, if we wanted to stamp them with a specific label, we're not even entirely aligned on what label that should be. This generation goes by a lot of names. Generation Z, the multi-generation, the pluralistic generation. My personal favorite, the doomed generation, the anxious generation. You know, a couple of years ago, the New York Times tried to put a definitive answer to this, and they were writing an article about what does Gen Z actually want to be called. So they turned to their social media channels and asked the audiences themselves, and the answer that got the most upvotes, the answer that was the most engaged, was a young man from Maine who just said, you know what, just don't call us anything. We don't believe in this whole cohesive nonsense of a generational label. So, and it's not that hard to understand why, too, because even how we measure Generation Z varies a little bit. And if we go by the Pew Charitable Trusts, Gen Z is defined as those individuals born between 1997 and 2012. So think about sitting down in a room with a 9-year-old and a 24-year-old and saying, let's talk about everything you guys have in common, your shared needs, your shared motivations. So then why do we do this? Why do we do this exercise? From my standpoint as a marketer, it's incredibly valuable to look at generational breakdowns, not to define an individual, but to understand the context in which they've formed their own identities and points of view. We want to understand that everybody has unique value systems, unique belief systems, but they're all shaped by large macro trends that everyone shares in common. So if we look at Generation Z in that regard, there's a lot about this generation that's really interesting and really unique to them. This is the first generation that was not of mature age when 9/11 happened. They've only known a post-9/11 world. Many of them weren't even alive when 9/11 happened. They've grown up exposed to the war on terror. It's really they've grown up in this environment where the world is constantly battling this invisible foe. They've seen their parents' jobs change quite a bit as they became teenagers, whether that's their parents joining the gig economy and having multiple jobs they're trying to juggle, or losing their jobs altogether. Remember, a lot of these folks were getting their allowances at the time of the Great Recession and experienced the hardships of their parents. There's a little bit of a trope that Gen Z is sort of mindless zombies locked to their phones. And there's a little bit of truth in that, but it's really not because it's their only form of communication. It's just their default. This is a generation that's always had a phone through their lives. In many cases, particularly for some of the younger Gen Z folks, it was always a smartphone or it was always a tablet. So really, their phones and their ability to be connected to different communities is really just their go-to default, much the same way millennials kind of default to communicating by email and Gen X defaults to using the phone. Think about their educational experience too. You know, these are students that grew up with active shooter drills. That's just something that was normal day to day. These are students that are entering college that are accustomed to asking for your gender identity and your preferred pronouns. That's nothing that's unusual. And more recently, for some of the Generation Z students that are graduating college, their last few years have been virtual or a hybrid environment. So they've had an entirely different educational experience than just about everyone else in this room. We look to the climate change movement. This is a really powerful piece of context about this generation, because I think the climate change is not seen as sort of a hippie granola movement to buy into or not buy into. For this generation, there's enough data now that it's proven to be real, and it's proven that none of us have done anything about it. And they're going to be the ones that have to live with it. So it's seen as something that is up to their power to control and to solve for, not to fix, but to survive as it affects them as they get older. They have endured through two dramatically different presidential administrations, both of which historical for very different reasons. So this is what they studied in school. This is what was on the news as they were going about their daily lives. And this is the context that they came into their own being's understanding. More recently, the social justice movement has hit a peak. Whether it's directly affecting individuals or calling them to be allies, it's something that they are drawn to as a larger calling and something that needs to happen for a productive society moving forward. And of course, that other thing that's been affecting us the last 18 months, the pandemic that has affected everything from their social lives, their educational prospects, to their employment prospects. So these of course, are macro things. They affected everybody in the room here. But I think what's affected Gen Z the most is that this has shaped their value systems. It's shaped their beliefs. It's shaped their worldview. And that's something that's interesting for us to study. So when the Chamber reached out to Elevation to put together the brand that would ultimately become RVA Now, we wanted to take that macro focus and bring it into more of a Central Virginia focus. So we executed a survey, and I apologize about the fly print. I hope you all have your binoculars with you today. But we did a digital survey in June of 2020. We electronically surveyed 472 individuals. And I know you can't see or read all that, but the important thing to take away is we had a pretty fair balance of gender breakdown, ethnic breakdown. We focused on the age range of college students and recent graduates. The one thing that I will call out is, if you can see in the top right corner, that was our breakout of representatives from different Central Virginia universities. And just by nature of our sampling pool, we had a disproportionate amount of respondents from the University of Virginia. So we had quite a few folks from the Charlottesville area. But then we were able to kind of counterbalance that by doing qualitative focus groups with student representatives, young professionals, higher education representatives, and folks from community institutions in Richmond. That validated a lot of what the survey was coming back to us with. And again, there's a little bit of an irony here, because we're talking about the uniqueness of this generation, but there's still opportunities to look for commonalities and patterns and trends. And the way that we do that is with an exercise that we call empathy mapping. And these aren't sort of the idea to say that this is a definitive label, but these are things that we saw as recurring things across the way that this generation thinks, acts, feels, and speaks. So this might be a little bit tough to read too, so I'm going to give you the high-level takeaways from them. When we look at that top left corner in terms of how Generation Z thinks, I think the thing that stands out for me about this generation is a deep sense of pragmatism. There's a sense of, if you think about all the things that they came into maturity enduring, there's a very logical sensibility to Generation Z in terms of weighing the pros and cons of every decision, trying to find a balanced approach to all their major life changes. One particular area that is in their choice for higher education. This generation still very much believes that the path to a good career is with a college degree, but I think with that underlying theme of pragmatism, they're evaluating it a little bit more critically. What's the return on their investment? Think specifically about these folks that invested in college and then graduated in June 2020 to a dried up job market. Conversely, the folks who graduated this year to a job market that is plentiful for them. Then if we look down in terms of trends in terms of how they feel, I think one of the things that marks this generation, and you even saw it in that earlier label, is this idea of anxiety and sort of this pressure that is constantly felt. I cut it for time today, but there is a study from Ernst & Young that actually takes Gen Z and breaks them out into 4 different personas. But one of the common threads throughout all of those was the pressure. On sort of the overachiever side of that spectrum from Ernst & Young, there's this mark to want to be the best you can possibly be in your field, and that you have all these eyeballs on you from society to do something productive with your life. And then even off the other side of that spectrum, that's sort of the go with the flow, there's still a pressure to present in society and to your peers like you're living a productive and fruitful life. So this is sort of an undertone to a lot of what defines this generation, this pressure to want to be doing something constructive with your life. We also heard from a lot of people that as they're making their career decisions, they're not strictly looking at it from a professionalism standpoint. They're also looking for purpose. They want to do something meaningful in the world, whether that is a big, sweeping, changing the world mentality, or just something within their own microcosm of what's important to them that they want to make a difference in. And then when we look at what they do have a tendency to job hunt a little bit and bounce around to different opportunities. Again, with that theme of pragmatism, they do evaluate quite a bit what is working and not working for them. And again, I'll sort of caveat this as we go through this, that this was June 2020, and it's incredible to understand how much has actually changed in the last 18 months, but I think there are a couple of things that we can point to that just intuitively have likely changed in the last 18 months. One of them is that verbatim in the bottom left corner, someone who told us that they have applied to over 100 jobs to try to find the career that was right for them. Again, in June 2020, that was a dramatically different environment. We actually, speaking from personal experience at Elevation, we actually had a situation a few weeks ago where a wonderful Gen Z digital analyst on our team who assures us that he was not job hunting was approached, interviewed, and given an offer that effectively doubled his compensation within 3 days. So that's the need that is in there for the market, and frankly, just something that we can't compete with. They're going to be evaluating opportunities in a much different manner. Another great thing that came out when we spoke with these individuals was balancing that sense of emotional intelligence. There's a really, really strong sense of emotional intelligence and awareness of burnout and awareness of work-life balance. I remember speaking to one young lady who was a freshman in college, I believe at VCU, and she had established in high school that she was going to major in computer science and also in music. And we asked her the reason for that. She said, I want a career, but I also want to pursue something that I'm passionate about that brings me joy. And I thought that was incredibly responsible for a woman of her age to come into college with that mentality. I mean, I as a millennial kind of came into college saying, I'm going to feel out what I want to do, and it was a time for proving. She had a game plan. She was pragmatic about it, and she had a balance for really what was going to be the next chapter of her whole life. So I know that Rachel is going to talk about this in a little bit more depth, but one of the things that I wanted to share with you as a result of this presentation was Gen Z's specific perceptions of Richmond as a place to work, as a place to live, and as a place to move. So one of the things, the biggest takeaway, and again, I'm giving sort of an abbreviated version of this. This was a much more in-depth study, but I'm pulling out some of the higher level points for you that no one can read. But that largest chunk on the left side, that is individuals who said that they are choosing where they want to live based on where the jobs are. Whether that is Richmond, DC, Sheboygan, they are going to go wherever the jobs are. Interestingly enough, that second largest wedge, it's sort of 5 o'clock in there, is people who said, I'm going to go where the jobs are, and I don't believe that they're in Richmond. So at its core, kind of the same response in a sense. So that's 2/3 of respondents saying that I am going to move where the best opportunities are for me. Now again, in June 2020, that was a much narrower playing field that is broadening up, and as Collin was talking about it, changing by varying degrees by different sectors. The other thing that I don't think will come as a huge shock to folks in this room is a challenge that we as a region continue to chip away at. And that's sort of that perception of Richmond as being the Old South. I know that the Chamber has tackled this challenge for a long time, and a number of other groups, private and public, have been working to try to shift perceptions of that. And there is a silver lining to this, but there's still very much this perception that Richmond is sort of an in-group, and it's harder to break into its old money, its old networks, its old companies. So that's one of the stigmas that we have to fight against. But one thing that was really interesting we uncovered from this study is we looked at what actually goes into a Gen Zer picking the region that they want to live and work in. I know you can't read this either, but we asked them to rank a number of different variables, and the 5 that rose to the top as the most important are safety, cost of living, a good place to raise a family. An interesting note about that, a lot of folks told us they are not planning on starting a family, but they want to be in a place where they could. So that was safety, cost of living, a good place to raise a family, cleanliness, diversity and inclusion, higher education, and job prospects. So we said, regardless of where you want to live, those are the things that are going to be most influential for them picking a place to go. We then took those same variables and asked them how the Richmond metro region stacked up. And the not so great news is it's actually pretty well inverted. On all those top key measures that I mentioned, Richmond as a region underscored in those. The variables where we did actually score higher than their rankings were some of the things that have been part of our regional story for a long time, our food and our arts culture, our rich history. However, those weren't things that were actually motivating people to want to come here. But there's a more interesting story beneath that, though. When we actually took that question, actually broke it apart between folks who were raised in the region versus folks who were not, you can see that folks who were raised in the region, the darker orange bar, scored higher on every single variable here. Pro tip, the deltas that were the largest in those changes were in proximity to the mountains and in the value of the dating scene. So I think if you want to impress someone from out of town, take them on a hiking date. If it doesn't work out, there's plenty of other fish. So that's one important thing, is that Richmond is really a market that needs to be experienced, to be appreciated. And this question, we asked them, what's your overall favorability of Richmond as a region to work and live and play in? And you can see we got great scores in that second ranking, which is somewhat favorable in both native and non-native respondents. But in that very favorable response, the folks who grew up here were almost twice as likely to say that they were very favorable for the region. So as I said, that draws to this thought that Richmond is really a place that you have to come and experience to understand the true value of it. And in fact, that leads to a number of different surprise and delights about how those variables that people underscored actually pan out to be pretty true. A lot of folks in our focus groups gave verbatims about this actually is an incredibly diverse and inclusive environment. Be surprised about the employers that are here. We heard from a lot of different folks that understood that there are major employers in the region, but maybe didn't necessarily understand all the opportunities that were there for them. For example, Altria. A lot of people know and recognize the name Altria, but might not recognize right off the bat that it's not only manufacturing opportunities, but supply chain opportunities, technology opportunities, et cetera. So telling that deeper story of the opportunities that are available in the region. Just the amount of things that are available to see and do in the region. And then the cultural underscore of everything that the region has to offer. When we talk to young professionals who had been in the market for some time, they actually call these things out as the reasons of why they stay in the region, why they continue to be employed here, why they're not drawn away by their jobs. It's that sense of community, that sense of culture, those things that they like to do that make them feel like they're a part of a fabric. It's that sort of small town feel in a big city environment that keeps people here. So I think one of the opportunities for you all, if you all are employers looking to draw more Gen Z talent, is it's not enough to hand them a glossy brochure about how great the city is. I think every city would do that for them. I think the opportunities are to turn your social media channels over to a Gen Z staffer for the weekend to show what their weekends are actually like. It's to call Beth Weisbrod and ask if they can have an interview with one of the young professional advisors to actually talk about what life is like in the Richmond region. It's actually giving them a little bit of a taste, invite them to stay the weekend, put them up at the Quirk or something, just to be able to experience our city's culture firsthand. Now, I did say there was a silver lining to sort of that old South mentality, and one of the things that did come very strongly out of our conversations was a very palpable sense that this is changing. This is a city of history, but it's a city of history that's changing all around us. And what we heard universally from higher education players, from current students, from recent grads, is that there is a palpable sense of change in the air in Richmond. And more importantly, a palpable sense of change that they can be a part of and help to shape. And that's something that's fairly unique to this market. Even folks who had grown up here are saying this feels like a different Richmond than it ever has before. And I feel like it's something where I can be involved in shaping that narrative. So that became the inspiration for the RVA Now brand. Not only a place where you can work, live, and play, but also a place that you can become a part of the story of this city and a part of this market. So RVA Now became the brand for introducing people to the Richmond that they don't know. And you can see this is how we positioned RVA Now as a brand statement. RVA Now is a program that introduces college students and postgrads to the Richmond they don't know, a place where they can find a great career, live the lifestyle they want, have fun off the clock, and help shape a city that pulses with progress. And those four pieces are very intentional to the content plan that the Chamber team has put together for RVA Now. It's creating opportunities to showcase not only the great employment opportunities in the region, what the lifestyle is like, the wonderful neighborhoods and opportunities that we have, the programmatic opportunities in the region, but then above all else, the opportunity to engage in forums like this and with folks like you all to be a part of shaping the next chapter of the region. And part of the centerpiece of this has been the RVA Now website that puts all that information at Gen Z talent's fingertips to explore firsthand accounts of what's life like in Churchill, or what do you do on a weekend in Scott's Addition, or what's life like to work at Altria. These are all opportunities that help create a more palpable sense of what the talent environment looks like in our city. So thank you for the opportunity to share that with you all. No.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Yost. I'm a managing partner at SIR and have been working lockstep with Beth over the past couple years in helping get the RVA Now up and running. It's been an exciting couple years, and I'm going to be sharing with you all some data from a study that we conducted in 2020. This was built on a study that we actually did in 2012 called the YRVA study. It was part of Richmond's Future. You may have heard about it. It was a really robust study trying to understand how college students, how young professionals in Richmond view Richmond, but also understanding young professionals from outside of the region and how they perceive Richmond as well. So we wanted, with the launch of RVA Now, to get some additional baseline data, because that was done in 2012. And we know that there have been a lot of changes in Richmond. We just heard Corey talk about that. And so we wanted to get a sense of, well, where are some of those perceptions today? So we did hear a little bit from Corey on some of that data as well. So this is going to build on what you heard. And what's great is that there's a lot of alignment in the data. So I think that we can feel pretty confident in that this is kind of how young professionals perceive Richmond. But this study was really focused on, why are young people coming to Richmond? Why do they stay? Why do they leave? What might attract their peers? And so we have a little bit of data that compares to 2012, but we're really focusing in on the 2020 data. We did want to note that this was conducted in August of 2020. We thought about pausing it given what was going on in Richmond at the time, but we decided this would be actually a great time to get that pulse. We know it was during the pandemic. It was shortly after George Floyd's murder. And there was a lot of kind of protesting going on in Richmond, and so we just need to note that as we look at some of the data, especially when it comes to how they're thinking about staying or leaving. We defined young professionals as 18 to 40, so this is a little bit of a bigger demographic than sometimes you may think about young professionals, but it's really helpful, especially as we think about retention, and are these people staying here long term. We had a couple different methodologies. We did an online scientific panel and also a convenience survey where we pushed a survey out through distribution links. So I'm going to walk through 5 key insights. I'm going to move pretty quickly, so hopefully you'll be able to keep up with me, but it's pretty high level. There's a lot more research that we have. If there's any questions, we can provide that for you, but this is the high level insights. The first is really around choosing RVA. So while location and job are important, a lot of young professionals are choosing to live here because they want to be near their friends and family. On average, respondents have lived in Richmond for 17 years, with nearly half being in the area for 20 or more years. And overall, 74% had some prior connection to making RVA their home, whether that's they spent their childhood here, they went to high school here, they went to college here. So there are some deep roots among this cohort. And their primary reason for choosing to live in RVA, to move to RVA, was because their family is here, followed by their job. And we do a lot of placemaking studies, and I will say that this is pretty unique, and it's a big opportunity for the Richmond region. We always ask this question of, kind of allocate points to, are you choosing because of people first, location first, or job first? And in Richmond, it's people first. We are starting to see location first jumping up in a lot of our studies because of remote work, but in Richmond it's still people first. So again, we have a unique opportunity, and there's to lean into our residents to be ambassadors, to get their family members to move back here, get their friends to move here, because we have a unique draw that way. So then we move on to overall satisfaction with RVA. It's seen as a diverse, history-rich, fun river city, and it received a lot of positive scores, but we did start to see some opportunities for improving satisfaction. We always ask these questions: what are the first 3 words that come to mind when you would describe this community, and in this case, the Richmond region? And here we see history, diverse, river, fun, beautiful, a lot of really positive words here. And then we asked them, well, compared to other cities, what are the 3 words that you would use to describe the Richmond region? And again, we see similar words here. Diverse is super big there. Busy, maybe that's not quite as positive. History, cultural, fun, friendly. Again, no glaring negative perceptions of the Richmond region here. We did ask a Net Promoter Score question. This is on a 0 to 10 scale. How likely are you to recommend Richmond as a place to play, live, work, move to? And this is a great question. It goes beyond satisfaction, because when you recommend something, you're there's a little more weight behind that. Your reputation's a little bit on the line. And here we see our Net Promoter Score is 24, which is up from 2012, where it was 21. So this is showing that we're moving in a positive direction in terms of perception, and this likeliness to recommend. 24 is a pretty strong score. We've seen some communities a little bit higher, but we've also seen communities in the negative. So we think that this is a pretty strong score for Richmond. Then we move into our place score. This is something that we developed with the Capital Region Collaborative. You might remember that initiative, and this was to find kind of an Uber metric for assessing a place as a place to play, live, adventure, which is really about a destination for tourists and visitors. for educational opportunities and for employment opportunities. And we kind of aggregate the different scores from these questions and get an overall score for a place. And for Richmond, our place score is 67%. Well, what does that mean? We ended up using this score in some of our other work with other communities to get some benchmarks. Now, these other cities, this is for all residents, not just young professionals, but you'll see that there's a range from about 4%. We decided, since that score was really low, that we wouldn't throw them under the bus, so we were just going to call them City X. But then to up to 80% with Minneapolis. And so we're, young professionals are at 67%. Richmond overall, this was done in 2017, was at 68%. So we're kind of middle of the road there. So there's opportunity to improve. You can see that we're better at being a place to play and to live and for employment opportunities, but our score is getting dragged down by people not necessarily perceiving us as a great destination for visitors and tourists or a place with educational opportunities. So as we start to think where are some areas to improve perception, those might be some good places to start. What's also interesting is that those who have no prior connection to Richmond and those who are over the age of 30 gave higher place scores. And so what this tells us, and Corey kind of started to talk to this too, it's about familiarizing folks with Richmond and all that there is to do. They maybe don't understand the breadth and depth of what we have. So like staying at the Crook Hotel is a great idea. That's going to help improve that visitation score. So those are opportunities for us, but we can also celebrate. We are becoming a better place to play and live and work. And we're seeing that in those scores as they've been improving over the past couple years. We then start to move into some deeper data on Richmond as a place for people to belong. So it's not just about a place to play, but are people able to build community? Is it a place for all people to thrive? And what we learned is that it's an accepting community, but maybe not one where all people feel that they can belong. What's interesting, and actually this aligns again with Corey's data, we did ask a question, what are some of these things that you've done? And they're most likely to have volunteered in the past couple years since they've been here. They've also bought a home, they've gotten married, they've had kids. So people are starting to plant roots. So they're volunteering, they're getting involved, they're planting those roots, and they feel that they can make a difference in the community. So we have our place score. We ended up developing over the past year or two a belong score, and because this is a newer score, we don't have comparative data yet, but we do think it has some good insights. And so this gets, again, a little bit deeper than those kind of overall metrics of play, live, and work into how are we as a community for all people? Are we accepting people from many different backgrounds? Is it a place where all people feel that they can engage and make a difference? Is it a place that respects different lifestyles? Does it offer opportunities for all people, from employment to networking to business startups to recreation? Is it where basic necessities are met for all people? And is it a place where all people can grow and thrive? And so our overall belong score is 53%. So this is lower than our place score. Again, we don't yet have this for other communities, and that's something that we're hoping to do. But when we look at it by some of these demographics, we can see that those who have lived in RVA less than 20 years and those who are female have higher belong scores. So it kind of starts to indicate that maybe people who have been around longer know a little bit more of our dirt and some of the challenges that we face as a community. What's interesting is when we can piece into each of those different elements of the belong, we see that we are really underperforming when it comes to engagement, where all feel that they can engage, that there's opportunities for all, and where basic necessities are met. And there's also a bit low score there too on that growth, where everyone can have opportunities to grow. So this again starts to help us understand that yes, we have a lot of positive things, but we also have a lot of work to do, that people maybe are accepting of different backgrounds, but when it comes to those deeper needs of belonging to a community and everyone having opportunities, that we still have some work to do. When it comes to the ideal place for young professionals and what they're looking for and how Richmond stacks up, we actually do meet a lot of those expectations, but there are some opportunities where we aren't quite hitting the nail on the head. So when we assess a quality place, we're always going to look at rational needs and emotional needs. And this can really work in anything. If I'm trying to go buy a t-shirt, there's rational needs. I want it to be white. I want it to be made of cotton. But then there are emotional needs. I want to feel cozy in it, or I want to feel like I'm being a responsible consumer. So there's both of those things that go into our perceptions of a place or of a product. So we have a lot of models that we did. I'm just going to focus on the gap analysis because the results ended up being pretty consistent across the different models. But here we look at a series of questions where we ask them how important are each of these attributes in an ideal place to live, and then how does Richmond stack up on those? How would you rate Richmond's performance? And then we align those and we're able to get a gap to see where are we not meeting our expectations. And I'm sorry, it might be a little bit hard to see here, but we see these are ordered in importance. Safety, having quality, affordable housing, offers a great food scene, is known for friendliness, and is thriving economically are those top 5 attributes. And I will say safety and quality, affordable housing pretty much every time are 1 and 2. They are the table stakes. You've got to feel safe. You've got to be able to have an affordable place to live. And it's rare that any community actually meets those needs. So it's not surprising here that we have gaps. I will say the gaps are a little bit bigger than sometimes we see. We were also a little bit surprised here to see it's known for its friendliness. And that was something that came up in some of the other models as well. So it might be that while we may be accepting of backgrounds that we just learned, we're not necessarily friendly about it. I'm not sure, but that's an opportunity for us. As we think about some of those rational attributes. When it comes to the emotional, I feel it's a place where I belong, or I feel like it's home where I belong, and then I feel like it's a place where I can achieve my financial goals, like buying a house, which kind of goes back to that quality, affordable housing. And it's a place that matches my values. So those are opportunities, again, from that emotional standpoint for us to start improving our perceptions. And so whether this is reality or perception, it is something that we need to think about, that we can address in our communication, but then also maybe there are some things that we can help get plugged into and make priorities like quality and affordable housing, because we know that will go a long way with these young professionals. And then finally, the majority are saying that they are optimistic about RVA's future and would choose RVA all over again. So we're going to hopefully leave here a little bit on a high note, although there are some challenges in this section as well, but 69% said that they're optimistic about the future. So that's really encouraging. They feel hopeful. And then we asked them, if knowing what you know now, would you make that decision to move to RVA all over again? And we see that 68% said, yeah, they would. So again, people are not regretting that decision to have moved here, and they would want to do it again. We asked them how long are they planning to stay in the Richmond region, and this might be hard to read, but the top bar is about I'm already planning or beginning to start a search to move, and then the next one is only another year or 2 are they planning to stay here. So that's 20% are kind of in that thought process of thinking about leaving. So it's moderately how we would love to see that a little bit lower, but it's not alarming. We think, the kind of net migration, people in and out. But the main reason folks are thinking about leaving is that, I've grown up here. I want a new experience. So that's not too surprising. There was some comments around avoiding crime and violence. There were specific references to the protests and some of what was happening in the time that the survey was taken. So I don't know necessarily if this is just a point in time feeling or if this is a longer term feeling. That will be something for us to monitor if we do subsequent waves of this research. And then some others are just saying, I want a new job, and they're getting either relocated or found a better experience somewhere else for them for their career. So our ultimate implication here is that as we look to the future, the people are happy, they're optimistic, they would make that decision all over again. But we also feel like we can't necessarily rest on our laurels. We do need to be focusing on retention. How do we keep people here? How do we make sure that they can feel like they belong, that this is a place that matches their values, and that, maybe that comes back to some of that friendliness, that they aren't feeling like they're able to get plugged in or build that community that they really want. But overall, we were encouraged by this data. And then just a quick summary here, going back through our points, is that, again, location and job are important. It's all about family and that connection here. We've got a unique opportunity as a result of that. We're seen as diverse, history-rich, fun river city, and that we really are experiencing a lot of positive perceptions and satisfaction. But there are some opportunities in helping improve perceptions of Richmond as a place for educational opportunities and for people to visit. We appear accepting, but again, there's opportunities for RVA to become better seen as a place that has opportunities for all and where basic necessities are met. And then we need to lean into things like safety, friendliness, affordable, and a thriving economy in a place where people feel like they can achieve their financial goals. So how can we start, again, communicating around some of these ideas may help us as we think about how do we better attract and retain talent in the Richmond region. So that's my story. Thank you for listening.
Good. Okay. Can you all hear me? Great. I hope you all enjoyed that. One question that came up is, will we have access to the slides? So we have permission to share the EMSI slides and elevation slides from Corey. We haven't yet gotten permission to share the slides that Rachel Burgess just presented. So we're happy to do that, but we also have access to the EMSI database. We are subscribers and can slice and dice a whole lot of this labor market analysis for you. Don't forget, you can download the whole report from the chamberrva.com website. And I think that was it for all of the questions that were in the chat. There are some links that were placed in the chat that correspond to some that the presenters also placed out there. So feel free to copy and paste them. Next up for RVA Now, we have our Why Richmond internship program info session coming up on February 25th. If your company hosts summer interns, this is a program for you. On March 22nd, we're hosting an internship workshop. And if you don't currently host interns, but you would like to, which would be a really good thing for the entire region, then this workshop is for you. And again, that's on the 22nd. We will be sending invitations and announcements out about both of these programs shortly in the coming days and weeks. But anyway, thank you all again for joining. And it looks like we're giving you a little bit of time back in your day, unless there are some questions at this point. Okay, great. Have a great day and thanks for joining.